and this is WPwatercooler episode number 347. Thinking next, how to move your website to new WordPress web hosting. Let's go around the room real quick, get everyone introduced. Say, Reed, tell us about yourself.
I'm shiny today. What I have to say. Hi, I'm Say Reed. I make WordPress, teach WordPress, preach WordPress at Say Reed Media on all the things.
How about you, Steve?
I am Steve Zenkett. I am the founder of Zconnective.
And
I host the I don't know what I do. I host the WordPress meetup. I'm not used to going second. Like Jason caught me off guard. I'm used to going last. So
Yep.
I host the OC WordPress.
He's like, I'm like Kobe, man. I walk out of the locker room last, man.
What's up with that?
Jonathan, how about you?
Jonathan Wold. I'm now a community wrangler for WooCommerce.
Woo woo! You can say it out loud.
Nice, congrats. Cosper, how about you?
Hey everybody, Jason Cosper, aka Fat Mullenweg, and it is the most wonderful time of year, the time of year where I wear sweatpants. Because it's nice and cozy and everything else.
Because California gets relatively cool enough.
The Central Valley definitely gets relatively cool. I think it was 48 this morning, so.
Woo.
Don't tell that to Jonathan, who's in Idaho.
I like the cold. That's great.
Russ, how about you, man? Tell us about yourself.
Hey, I'm Steve Zeng. Oh, wait, he usually has the last spot. I'm sorry, man. Hey, I'm Russell Aaron. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm inside of a hotel right now. I don't live here, by the way. I do WordPress. Oh, listen, I'm glad to be back. I can't tell you how excited I am to talk about migrations. Let's do it.
Awesome. I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog. I do this show as well as another show called WP Blab, which we actually just moved to Fridays. So feel free to go take a look at that. That's Fridays at 9 a.m.
Fridays at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time?
Freaking
Always
busy.
on our
I have a
job.
busy morning. Always busy mornings. I want to say thank you very much for ServerPress Makers Desktop Server for helping us out. We really appreciate it. They make local WordPress development easy. If you're looking to do local PHP 7, if you want to be able to run this thing on a Mac, on Windows, if you want full CLI support, as well as internet sharing and live updates and deployments, go check them out over at serverpress.com.
And they hook you up with sweet swag when you're at WordCamp.
Indeed, they do.
I still have that cup that squeezes every time you touch. Like, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I don't have that cup.
So today we're gonna be continuing our Grande series of WordPress and how you can go and migrate your website from one web host to another. If you remember last week we talked about ditching your current account over at your current web host, and now you need to know how to move it to someplace else. And I would say before, and just a caveat is before you go and turn one off and switch the other one on. Like, keep them both running at the same time. Like, get one going, migrate your stuff, get it back over, you're good.
No, just cowboy that shit.
Look, you stayed up all night. You learned everything you could. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
But are we?
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Yep.
I personally completed hundreds of migrations, and it's still a little stressful.
It's always stressful.
Like it's still there's always these question marks of uncertainty, whether it's at the DNS level when you're making the switch, whether it's testing. And nowadays I sort of have this, okay, how important is this site? how much stress like for a lot of my personal ones, I'm like, whatever. Back it up, pull it up, we'll test in production.
I like
no, when
question marks of uncertainty is better than point of uncertainty.
I think Jonathan's right. I think there are different levels because when we're migrating for a client, especially an e-commerce client, right? We've got to plan that stuff for months. Right? It's not a simple thing.
There's three things that always scare me. It's, am I going to get a real copy of the database, or is something going to corrupt? And then do I have to FTP plugins down, or do I have a Git? And then like what server? How do I get it up back to there? So those are the 3 points, Jonathan, that stress me. Like, am I going to get the copy of the thing that I need?
Yep.
So I assume we're talking migrating WordPress to WordPress, right? We're not talking about migrating another platform to WordPress.
No,
right?
That's a whole different.
That's a whole other show.
I don't even know if Ariana Grande has done that song yet, so we're definitely not just doing that one yet. Nope.
Okay.
Casper, has she done one of those yet?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, so we're talking about WordPress to WordPress and going from, and it could be a couple of different things. You could be that you're moving from WordPress.com to WordPress.org, and it could be that you're going from just WordPress to WordPress. But I think what we should do is kind of talk about from the start is how do you prepare that data, put that data into some package, send it off to the other spot, and then you put it back onto that web host. I said package.
I mean, I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to say I make a backup, and I'm going to put it onto a staging site, but I'm going to try to put a staging site on my new server because I want to see if I can upgrade to PHP, if I can upgrade my SQL or my Marinara database. I would say Marinara instead of Mariana. So I'm going to make sure that what I have is compatible on my new system, and also I knock out building the staging site as well, so I'm already ready to go.
That's my favorite way to migrate. Absolutely, I love starting with a fresh new host, a fresh new server. You build on the staging site, everything's clean. You don't really have to migrate. Well, you're bringing stuff over like content and whatever, but you don't have to worry about any of that other stuff. It's that's my absolute it's my favorite way to update sites and especially if you're doing a full redesign, just starting fresh. Can we just burn this old one and just start?
I think Oscar will agree with me that when you set up a new server, you have a chance to dial in Nginx. You have a chance to dial in your configuration file, how you're setting up from the back end before you even output that. That's very important when you're thinking about migration.
More and you can just update with impunity. You're just update. I don't care. No one's looking at this. It's fresh
and for most folks, if you're moving to a new host. If you're not the type who's DIY and kind of dialing in things yourself, the new host is going to have things pretty optimized. So another plus for not just wanting to pull things over wholesale is you might be pulling over config files or other things that are not optimized for the new environment. So in general, and it seems a little bit counterintuitive, but a lot of my migrations, if it's possible, especially if it's lower stakes, it's ideal to have brand new WordPress install,
brand new,
pull over content into a new theme. Reset plugins.
So the only thing you have to be careful with there is redirects, and if they had a weird page configuration or anything like that, you do need to be cognizant of your SEO, because I've seen that happen with a lot of clients. Not that I have ever done, because I'm hyper cognizant of SEO, because it's one of the most important things when you have a site that's been around.
It's how you get found on the internet.
It's kind of important. It's a little thing, but I'm really surprised at how many developers just switch that ish over and don't even pay attention to it whatsoever. And then I get emails from clients who are old clients or friends or whatever who are hey, suddenly we're not on the internet anymore. What happened? And I was everything.
I think there's an Ariana Grande song called "Switch That Ish Over."
Yeah. So let's bring it down a couple levels first. Let's start about how you get your data out of your old site into your new site, right?
Well, according to Wikipedia.
One of the simplest ways, right? If all you're doing is pulling out your posts, your pages, things like that, is WordPress importer, which I don't know how. I don't know. Scroll down a little bit, Jason. I don't know why this has been in 4 million active installations, but it's still at a beta version, 0.6.4.
Hey man, Gmail was beta for 10 years, bro. It's just what happens.
Also, why are there? This is just the regular one, so no one unactivates it.
Hey, can I just say this is a future episode of just going to this repo and picking apart these?
Love it. Oh, that sounds awesome. But this will allow you to export an XML file, right? Very simply from your old WordPress site and import it into your new WordPress site. And you've got your posts, your pages, your categories. It will import images.
Yeah.
Yep.
This is one of those plugins that doesn't feel like a plugin because you like don't install it from the plugins page. You do it from tools, and so it doesn't. I never even really thought about it as being a plugin before. Although
I don't think it's probably why it's in beta. It shouldn't be a plugin. It should just be part of core. Right?
Yeah,
you should be able to get your data out of WordPress.
So
it's kind of the whole selling point, isn't it? It's not
I have always made use of just the built-in core export, with the exception of doing like straight database, like via WP Migrate DB Pro or whatever the case might be. Yeah. But for basic stuff, I've found export and that import working good. What about you guys? Are there other ways that you've used to get your data out?
I use the import as well and the export because like when I go to pages, like I will build specific pages on my local and maybe I only want to export those. Yep. So I changed the author to like a crazy name that I never use, and then I can export that page by that author and it only gets the one page I'm looking for instead of exporting, everything. So I like that functionality.
Cool.
So if I'm doing an export only because I tend to be a little more technical, and if you are more comfortable with this and your current host offers WP CLI, the export
command line interface.
Yeah, the export command WP CLI is fantastic because it doesn't run into a lot of the PHP timeouts that running an export in from the actual site would net you. Occasionally you will get an incomplete export and then you import it into your new site. You think everything's cool and then you realize you're 70 posts short or you're missing a bunch of comments.
This is supposed to be a newbie guide. I don't think we should be talking about CLI. Just saying. Nothing scares people. Like what? Like what? What do you mean? Why?
I mean, I don't.
No, I actually think it's good knowledge to have because
you think newbies should be opening their terminal?
Yes. No, I'm not suggesting that. Okay, but they should know that this exists because while this isn't on by default in WP Engine, you can have it turned on, or you can contact support through their chat, tell them to run this for you, and they'll give you the export file.
I mean, if you're using ServerPress or Local by Flywheel, like it comes built in. You should just start, getting used to it. You're going to come into it when you install NPM.
Okay.
You should just do it.
If anybody's running VPN, man, we're in trouble.
Go on, Cosper.
I was gonna say.
Don't do that hand sign though. It's been labeled Anti-Defamation League.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Calling you out. That's fine.
Okay.
Just none that have been designated by the Anti-Defamation League as hate symbols. Okay.
Moving on.
Yeah. Not about that.
No, I know.
So, one of the main things about that though is knowing that you really, when you run an export from your site, not from CLI, not from anything else, you need to check that export and make sure it is an actual complete export. And knowing that CLI exists, knowing that you potentially have a way to talk to support at your host and say, hey, I need an export of my posts. You can even, if you want to BS them a little bit, say, hey, I'm working on a new version of my site. I'd like to get a copy of all my posts. Can y'all help me with that? And they'll think nothing of it. Oh, he's probably developing something locally. He's not looking to move off of us. And they'll end up giving you a copy of your site.
What, you have to protect your host feelings? You don't want that support chat to be like, oh, no, he's leaving us. I'm so
No, what they're going to do is they're going to move you into that whole other script to get you to stay, right? So then they start asking you all those questions, right? Why are you leaving?
It's almost like when you send your friends when you call.
Answer the question because you suck.
It's almost like when you call a bank and you just keep saying customer service just so you can finally get to the end point.
I want to say though, all of those things to me, if we're trying to do a noob's guide for this, if this is what we're doing, then I don't think those are really realistic solutions. Even
sure.
Chatting at your host and being like, I'd like a CLI download of my post, like that's out of the scope for most beginners.
Okay, so here's something that I suggested last week to kind of give people some homework for this week. There is a plugin called Migrate Guru by the folks who do Blog Vault. It works with basically any host as long as they provide FTP, SFTP, or FTP with TLS. Migrate Guru is, it works great. There's been a few situations where it hasn't worked great, and because it's run by Blog Vault, they want to understand why it failed, and they're actually pretty good about helping you out. So what I do when I'm moving a site, and especially for a newbie who I don't really want to be hands-on with moving a friend's site, like I don't do work for friends for free, and some people aren't really. No, hell no.
I agree.
Get paid.
Yeah, stop doing that. It's painful.
Yeah, get paid to borrow from Rihanna. Bitch, better have my money. Right?
Oh, is this one of those? Is this one of those collaboration songs where Ariana Grande keeps up with it? Okay.
Yeah. So on top of that, once I have a copy of the site made with Migrate Guru, if you have an actual active site like Steve touched on with WooCommerce, with something like that, that is adding sales, adding posts, comments. There's a product that I've tried, loved, and used called WP Merge. WP Merge is...
It's still around?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get it pasted into the chat.
I always put people on Updraft Plus because I know where Updraft is going to go. I know the configuration. I can almost set it up blindly, and I know how I'm going to get my export. I know how I'm going to get my backup, and I just install that. It's become so quick.
It's a solid plugin that's been around for a really long time.
And
So
the
thing I love about WP Merge, sorry, Say.
Do it, Cosper. Take it.
The thing I love about WP Merge is you're running it on your production site and your secondary site, and as changes are happening on one site, they're getting a post ID that is massive and huge. It's not adding a new post ID that's like post 3,000 or something like that. It's like 3 million something other and 3,000. So like they're really like growing out the post number or the whatever ID. They have that bundle that they list. Yeah, okay, it's pricey. WP Merge is a little more affordable, however, but if you're gonna move a site, I recommend it. $147 to make sure that everything gets moved over some people that might be out of their price range.
If you're gonna pay $147, this is something that I like about.
I also don't think this is a newbie thing saying, "Hey, go pay for this service too." I kind of feel like it's the same thing with the CLI.
It's like hiring a truck to show up and pick up the stuff and move it for you.
Fair point. Okay.
Yeah, but you're still having to do it yourself. So this is a thing in the trend, really over the past even just last couple of years. It used to be that you could, at WP Engine or at most sites, they would migrate the site for you. And they would actually, the people would do it. They would probably use one of these plugins, but they would just do it in-house for you. And now WP Engine, even DreamHost that I just checked, have all moved to manual, i.e. you are doing the plugin, the moving, even though you might be using their setup plugin. Most of them are using Blog Vault.
Blog Vault, yep.
They set that up for you. But at least, I don't know, I'd have to check if WP Engine still offers it, but DreamHost still offers, you can pay them to do it. So if you're at the point where you're having to buy a plugin for $147 to move your host or move your site, you should just pay them to move it, because it's about the same price, and they'll handle it. They'll move everything, and you can just, turn it over to them. You give them, access to what they need, and then your life is easier. And that is what I would recommend for anyone who is not technical or whose site makes them money or is like a business site, because you don't want to risk this. Like if your site is down for 3 days or if you lose sales records, or if you lose content, or you lose SEO tracks, SEO ranking, that that can be really damaging to your business on the long term.
WP Engine does do it. I found an article from October 14th, 2009 that says WP Engine hassle-free migration. Just,
2009.
So
2009.
I was going to give a mention to that WP Engine migration plugin. They have their own plugin that is actually really good. I've used it on several sites, and
their PHP compatibility one is great too.
The WP Engine automated migration plugin really does work well.
Hey, Cosper, what can you tell us about? No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
I am not at liberty to discuss anything about WP Engine.
Hey, I would never ask you to. I've never asked you to.
Those plugins do work well, and I think those are easy. So if you're moving to a host that offers their own plugin-based migration, you can do those if you have a moderate to somewhat decent understanding of your website. But honestly, then you start getting into DNS, and
yes,
we haven't even talked security either. Like if you're running iThemes and you have permissions locked down, directories and stuff, we haven't even got that far either.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So it's it really depends on who we're talking to, and this is supposed to be a newbie's guide to that. So I don't want to just say that my blanket answer is pay someone else to do it, but
pay someone else to do it.
I will say going in
responsibility, not like Jonathan was saying, the stress of it. If this is part of your livelihood, your business, don't take that risk if you are not fully comfortable doing this. It's not worth it. It's not. Things can go wrong.
So
Jonathan, you had something?
I was gonna say this is a really good point. Does anybody have a pro tip, something to share? What would you do crisis to avoid your crisis, whatever it is?
So on one of the things that I've liked most on the Mac, there's a number of different ways to do this. There's a little app called Gas Mask that lets you set your local DNS. And so zooming all the way back out for a moment, the idea here is before you switch your DNS, switch your domain name to point to the new host, it's really nice to be able to simulate it and test it locally. And before I felt comfortable doing that type of stuff in the command line, I used Gas Mask first. I think there's a few others as well.
That is a scary looking page.
I was gonna say when I googled gas mask, that is not what came up. All right.
Yeah.
That is really scary.
There's a few different ones.
What in the hell?
It allows you to.
That's the guy at the Denver airport.
Computer, so that when you type in a domain name, it will point to the new server as if the DNS has been updated. So. When you're all done, you'll log into your domain, change the DNS to point to the new. This lets you simulate it locally and switch on and off really easily. It's amazing. And there's equivalent tools for PC.
Just FYI, that's marketed to a certain demographic.
So one of the sites that I use when we are migrating DNS is what's my DNS.net. I just put it in the show notes, right? And so that's great because you can actually see if the DNS has been updated, right? And so you can see the progress because there is a propagation time when you update DNS. Not everybody updates the same. The gas mask trick that you showed is good. I actually just go in and edit my host file. That's a little bit more advanced. I understand, but so I'm what I'm seeing is not necessarily what my client's seeing during that propagation time.
Yeah,
We usually quote about a 24 to maybe even 48-hour period for total propagation of DNS. But what's my DNS.net will actually give you the status update.
So my pro tip is that I use WP Migrate DB Pro. So I use Migrate DB Pro. Mm-hmm. So I have that on production, and then I have a staging site. So I actually use Migrate DB Pro to pull from production to staging, and then that's where I make my export. So I never, because an export can fail sometimes to crash the site. So I always export from staging. I migrate from production to staging, and then I make a download of my SQL. And then my pro tip here is try to set up your local a few times. If you can set it up a few times hassle-free, then when you get to your host, you're probably going to have the same success. Yeah. Maybe a little speed bumps, but it's not going to be terrible.
That's an amazing.
It's practice installing it locally a few times.
Yeah. Mine would be that you make sure.
Oh, can you hear me ruffling papers?
Mine would be to make sure that when
doing some light filing.
I go to set up DNS that the DNS, I go into the entries I'm going to be changing, and I go in and make sure that I set the TTL, which is the time to live, as low as you can put it down. There's a good and a bad to this. The good is that when you switch everything over, that it's only going to last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the lowest that your DNS will allow you to do it. There's other ways to do this as well, where if you use another like third-party DNS service or something like that to kind of make that happen. But really get that TTL down pretty low and give that like 48 hours before you're even going to think about moving stuff, because you set that and that setting doesn't actually go into effect until after everything expires, and now it's starting to use the new values. So definitely do that. That would be my thing.
I always set my TTL to yesterday.
My pro tip on this is manage expectations with all the parties that be, right? So up front, when you're planning migration, this specifically, when it comes to DNS, you want to manage expectations that you don't have any control over this. I can't control the time it takes to propagate, and so you need to make a plan for propagation, right? So if you are dealing with e-commerce or subscriptions or any data that's going to go into the database that is critical, what you want to do is change or right before you change the DNS, put that old site into some sort of a maintenance mode so that you're not taking new entries into the database, and then turn on the other site. And so that way you don't have any sort of data collisions or loss of data between the two.
Yeah, especially if you're doing orders, or if you have any sort of e-commerce site, you have to turn it off.
Absolutely. It's like I just said that. So anything with e-commerce. But anything that where you're taking critical data, you want to kind of shut that site down into maintenance mode before you do the DNS switchover.
You know, my favorite pro tip is if you're doing this yourself and you're not, you haven't done it before, that you're not paying someone to do it, is to get on your support with your host, and maybe your host and your new host, depending on who it is, and have them walk you through the DNS changes on wherever your domain name is registered. They will walk you through it. They're like, okay, now change the A record to this. And you're like, is the A record? Like, they will literally walk you through step by step, because every single one of those,
as long as they know what the A record is,
every host has a different situation. And also it matters if you're changing over your email, and if you have email somewhere else, which we haven't talked about. We talked briefly about last week, but you don't want to touch, if you've got your email going off to Google, you don't want to touch those MX records, right? You want those to stay and be safe. So it's not like changing just your entire DNS. And we keep saying DNS, and that means you're moving your entire domain to be managed by your new host. And that is, in a lot of cases these days, not what you're doing anymore.
I think we should. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
I'm just saying that's really important to not just.
Hey, I'm gonna let you finish. I'm just gonna say.
I think we should back all the way up, though. And designate and that your host and your DNS, your registrar are two different entities, right? And so
they might.
But to do the migration, you have to have access to your registrar. Right. Yeah. And I say this because a lot of my clients come to me and their old developers set up the domain name or controls their registrar, and they have to then wrestle that away. Right.
That's
so to do this, you have to have the login for your registrar, which is like a GoDaddy or Network Solutions or Namecheap or something along those lines.
And you should probably fix your email situation first. That should be your first step. It should not be an afterthought, because you won't be able to do anything then. You be screwed.
I mean, just start the conversation. Just start the conversation, right? Get the ball rolling. And maybe you don't know any of this at first, but within a couple emails, you'll learn a lot of the lay of the land with your current host and how it's going. And I think it's very valuable, Say.
Thank you so much, Russ. I appreciate your vote of validation.
Now I don't think it's as valuable.
If I can, a final thought. Say kind of took my pro tip, which is talk to your host. However, to expand on that just a little bit, if your host cannot help you get things migrated over in an easy and comfortable way, find another host.
You're going from a bad.
You're already going through a change.
Next.
Yes, you're already going through a change, and Jonathan, you just stepped on my fucking joke.
The anticipation was killing me, dude. Like,
that's all right.
We're just stealing Cosper's lines. We're like, what was that, Cosper? What were you gonna say?
Just on to the next one, baby.
I mean, you can only drum roll for so long before you like get to it.
All right, folks, that's about it. I want to say thank you very much for ServerPress for helping us out today. Go over to serverpress.com. If you want to learn about their other tool, which is WP Site Sync, they talk about how they can do migrations between local as well as site to site and those sorts of things. So feel free to go take a look at that over at WPwatercooler.com to learn about our sponsors and the things that are going on over there. Thank you very much for all of you for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. Talk to y'all later.
People.
Bye.
Bye.